At that family reunion, I had this idea, to bring everyone together. I thought it would be like old times where we'd laugh and share stories. I paid for everything, the venue, the food, even the travel for some. I even had these matching t-shirts made for us all, thinking it would be a fun touch. When they handed them out, mine had "biggest disappointment" printed across it. I just stood there, holding it and trying to process what it meant. It didn't even feel like a surprise. It was more like the final confirmation of something I had been trying to ignore. I looked down at those words and felt them hit me like a ton of bricks. My sister Laura found it funny. She said it was just a joke. I guess to them it was. Frankie Ben, across the table, laughed it off too. My parents, they stayed quiet at first. Then my mom gave this awkward little laugh, and my dad just shook his head with a smile that felt more like pity. I nodded along, pretending to play along, while inside I was crumbling. I folded the shirt neatly and put it down, hoping no one noticed my hands shaking. Maybe they did notice, but just didn't care. I don't know what I was expecting, really. I had organized the whole thing, paid for it all, and there it was, a reminder of where I really stood with them. It felt like a punchline to some cruel joke. I wanted this weekend to mean something more, a chance to feel included, but instead, it just highlighted my place in the family. And the irony of it all? They used my credit card to make those shirts. I felt this deep exhaustion, not anger, just a bone-deep weariness. I excused myself, saying I'd be right back, and went to the guest room. Technically, it was my room since I rented the whole house. I needed a moment to collect myself. I opened my bag and found the folder I had brought. I had printed those documents on special parchment, something that felt significant, meant to be a keepsake. I had imagined us celebrating together, maybe even with champagne, but now that seemed laughable. I returned to the dining room where everyone was busy taking a selfie in their new shirts, oblivious to my absence. I stood there for a moment, unseen, and then opened the folder. Slowly, deliberately, I began tearing the papers in half, one page at a time. Laura was the first to notice. She seemed confused. Ben looked concerned. My dad started to rise from his chair, but I didn't give him the chance to say anything. I placed the torn pieces on my plate, smiled in a way that felt more like a dare, and told them to enjoy their shirts. Then I walked away. There was no drama, no shouting, just the sound of my footsteps on the wooden floor and the creak of the screen door as I stepped into the cool night. It was a quiet kind of release, a final step away from what I thought family should be. I remember that day so vividly, like a scene etched into my mind forever. It was the day I decided I'd had enough. I didn't even bother grabbing my jacket when I stormed out. I didn't need it. The cold didn't bother me at that moment. I was too wrapped up in a whirlwind of emotions. As I made my way to the car, my phone started buzzing incessantly. One call, then another, then 3 more. It felt like I was standing on a fault line as it opened up beneath me. I didn't answer any of them, not yet. I wanted them to see what I'd done first. I wanted them to feel it. I sat there in my car for what felt like an eternity, just staring at my hands gripping the steering wheel. I was calm, too calm. It was as if my body hadn't yet processed the enormity of what had just transpired. The laughter echoed in my mind, a cruel soundtrack I couldn't mute. My family, my mom, my siblings, even my dad, laughing at me as if my pain was nothing more than a harmless family joke. It wasn't harmless. It was never harmless. I could trace the hurt back to when I was 9 years old. That was the year Ben shattered the neighbor's window with a baseball, and somehow, I was the one grounded for not stopping him. Laura failed a test and lied about it, yet I was the one lectured for being a bad influence. Every mistake in that house seemed to have my name attached to it, even if I wasn't there. At 12, I remember getting a C in math. It was my first, and I cried. Not because of the grade, but because I knew exactly what was coming. the sarcasm at the dinner table, Mom's dramatic sigh, Dad's quiet disappointment. Meanwhile, Ben could fail an entire semester and still receive extra spending money just for trying. When I was 17, I begged them to co-sign a small student loan. Just a signature, not even money. They said no. They said I needed to learn responsibility. By then, Ben had wrecked 2 cars, and Laura had moved to Europe for a photography course funded by our parents. But I needed to learn responsibility. So I worked nights, slept 4 hours a day, and built something from nothing. I started with a tech service, then a subscription platform. I learned how to code, how to pitch, how to face rejection, and keep going. I didn't ask for much. A little acknowledgement would have been nice. Maybe a simple "we're proud of you" instead of becoming the family joke. I was the odd one out, the one who always showed up late to Thanksgiving because I was probably coding in a basement somewhere. When I secured my first 6-figure investment, I told no one. When I cleared my student debt in one lump sum, I told no one. When my company went viral, still no one knew. It felt like if I shared my successes, they'd just twist it into another joke or worse, take credit for it. But I watched. I watched Laura host parties in apartments I knew she couldn't afford on her salary. Watched Ben post cryptic Instagram captions about mental health, only to DM me for money 2 days later. Watched my parents struggle with their mortgage, yet still managed to buy anniversary cruises. I started helping quietly, an anonymous donation here, an untraceable transfer there. Despite everything, I still wanted to believe in family. I thought maybe if I gave enough, they'd finally see me. That hope was shattered last Christmas. I offered to fly everyone out to a ski lodge I rented. My mom told me, I remember the day like it happened just yesterday. I was sitting in my small apartment, staring at my computer screen, and I realized something had to change. My family had no idea what I had been building, what I had achieved, and I wanted to share it with them in a way that would make an impact. So I started planning. It took months of meticulous preparation. I had a vision of how it was all going to unfold. I wanted to give my parents, who had worked so hard all their lives, an early retirement. I wanted to pay off their mortgage completely, something I knew would lift a massive weight off their shoulders. For Laura and her kids, I planned to help them move to a better school district, to give them a fresh start. And Ben, my brother who had struggled with debts, I wanted to offer him relief and even a chance to start anew if he wished. Each document was carefully crafted, signed, and sealed. I chose navy blue folders to match the table decor at the reunion. It was going to be perfect. I imagined the moment over and over in my mind. My mom's face lighting up with pride and tears as she read the letter. The slow realization dawning on her that the son she once thought was lost had managed to create something meaningful. I saw my dad standing up silently, gripping my hand in a rare show of affection. Laura admitting she had misjudged me, and Ben being genuinely surprised and maybe even a little impressed. I had so many versions of that moment playing in my head, each more beautiful than the last. But what I got instead was a joke printed on a t-shirt. Maybe you're thinking it wasn't meant to hurt. Maybe it was just a poorly timed joke. Maybe if I had told them beforehand, their reactions would have been different. But deep down, I knew they were aware. They saw the car I drove, noticed my clothes, observed the way people reacted when I casually mentioned my company. Once, my mom even asked if I was doing okay financially, but in that careful, practiced way people do when they're fishing for confirmation without wanting to seem impressed. They didn't care. Or maybe they did care, and it made them uncomfortable because it challenged the narrative they had constructed about me. So they laughed. It was easier to keep me in that little disappointment box than to admit they might have been wrong about me all this time. And now they were going to find out what was really inside those folders. Not just them, but everyone. Everyone who had ever heard them whisper about poor Frank, the failure. Everyone who believed I was just bouncing from one unsuccessful project to another. They were about to learn the truth. But things were going to get worse before they got better, because I hadn't even seen the messages yet. The ones they were already sending, the lies they were beginning to spin, the narrative they were crafting without giving me a chance to explain. That was next. I hadn't even left the city before the rumors started spreading. The first call came from a friend I hadn't heard from in months. He asked if I was okay, said my sister had posted something strange, claiming I had a breakdown at the reunion. Breakdown, that was the word she chose. I opened Facebook, and there it was. A picture of the dinner table from earlier. T-shirts spread out, wine glasses still half full, a cake in the middle. The caption read, "Some people just can't handle being part of a family. We still love you even when you self-sabotage." No names, no specifics, but the implication was clear as day. The comments were already piling up, people speculating, making assumptions, and I was left feeling more alone than ever. I guess it's time to finally put everything out there, to tell my side of the story. You know, the truth has this way of gnawing at you, especially when it feels like the whole world is watching a different version of events unfold. There I was, scrolling through my phone, feeling the weight of the comments that kept pouring in. They were all over my social media, and each one felt like a little jab. People were sending me messages like, "So sorry, girl. You deserve peace." Or, "Some people are just toxic. Family can be messy." And the classic, sending hugs. It felt like everyone had an opinion. Everyone knew what was best for me without really knowing anything at all. But that was just the beginning. The real storm hit when my phone started buzzing with notifications from the family group chat, screenshots, and forwarded messages from cousins. It was like a chain reaction. My aunt reached out asking if I was okay. She said my mother had called her, sobbing, claiming I'd had a meltdown, tearing up legal documents in some manic episode. I couldn't believe it. Ben, my cousin, sent me a direct message. It was harsh, like a slap in the face. "Dude, you really need help. You embarrassed all of us. We tried to include you, and you made it a scene." Real classy. His words stung, but I knew I couldn't let them get to me. Include me? That was a joke. I didn't even bother to reply. Instead, I forwarded the original documents to my attorney, asked him to timestamp the email, and copied my assistant. Just 5 minutes later, she responded, "Would you like me to push the Forbes feature to this weekend? I can reattach the scanned pages." I told her yes. That was exactly what I needed because I had options. I had proof. I had receipts. They only had a story, a flimsy one at that. But I knew how these things worked. The louder they repeated it, the more damage it could cause. My family had a knack for rewriting history, twisting narratives to suit their needs, but not this time. I was done letting them shape my story. It was my turn. I decided to start quietly. I shared the Forbes link without any tags or commentary, just the article. It was about the underdog founder who secretly funded his family's life for a decade and then decided to cut ties. Inside, there were photos of the documents I had torn up at the reunion, signed and dated. The article mentioned the company valuation, which was over $30 million, and the anonymous donations that were traced back to me. It talked about the mortgage payments, the college funds I had quietly set up under shell accounts. It even mentioned the tech mentorship grant I launched 6 months ago for people who'd been written off by their own families. And it briefly but clearly explained why I walked away. Not with bitterness, but with clarity. Within hours, my inbox was flooded. First came the congratulations, then the apologies, and then the panic. Laura left me a voicemail asking, "Why would you make that public? You're humiliating us." And Ben texted me, "Wow, real mature. Hope you feel good about ruining the family name." My mother reached out too, saying we needed to talk, claiming I misunderstood a joke, that they were just having fun. Misunderstood a joke. It was almost funny how they kept doubling down, but I knew this wasn't over. The story was gaining traction, and the spotlight I never wanted was about to get even brighter. A YouTube channel picked up the story, then a podcast, and before I knew it, a short documentary was in the works. Comments kept flooding in. People chose sides, but mostly they chose mine. I guess people can see humiliation when it's right in front of them, especially when it's wrapped up with a smile and called family. Ben tried to fight back online, ranting about me being unstable, claiming I was twisting facts. But someone hit back with a screenshot of the contract I'd written for him, annotated with dates. Another person dug up an old tweet where Laura joked about me. It was a mess, but in a way, it felt liberating to see the truth finally coming out. I never imagined my life would take this turn, but here I am, sitting in front of this camera, ready to tell my story. It's not easy to open up about something so personal, but I think it's time. You see, I used to be the golden child, the one everyone thought had it all together, but the truth is, I was just trying to keep my head above water in a family that had a very specific idea of what success looked like. And when I didn't fit that mold, things got complicated. I became the black sheep, the one who was always a little different, a little off. They didn't understand me, and for a long time, I didn't understand myself either. I kept trying to fit in, to be what they wanted, but it was never enough. I felt lost, but I wasn't. I was just done with the pretense, with pretending to be someone I wasn't. So I made a change. I found my own path, my own success, and it wasn't what they expected. But it was mine, and that made all the difference. It was strange, how things unfolded. I never set out to prove anything to anyone. I just wanted to be happy, to live a life that felt true to me. But when I started to gain some recognition for my work, things got complicated. There was an article about me in Forbes highlighting my journey and achievements. It was a big deal, a moment of validation, but it also stirred up a lot of resentment from my family. They didn't like that the narrative was shifting, that I was no longer the one who didn't quite measure up. They tried to paint me as the problem, as someone who was exaggerating for sympathy. Ben, my brother, even went so far as to post a long thread online about how I was always dramatic, how I'd always felt left out, even when they did their best. It hurt to see him do that, to see him try to undermine everything I'd worked for. But I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I had the truth on my side, and I knew that in time it would speak for itself. The hardest part of all this was realizing that my family didn't really know me. They had this idea of who I was, this version of me that fit into their world, but it wasn't me. And when I finally started to speak up, to set boundaries, they didn't know how to handle it. Laura, my sister, went into full damage control mode. She started reaching out to extended family, telling them that I wasn't well, that the success had gone to my head. She tried to make it seem like I was the one who'd cut ties, that it wasn't about the t-shirt incident, but about me always looking for a reason to leave. My parents, they stayed quiet publicly, but I know they were calling around, trying to frame it as a misunderstanding, a sad situation that had just gotten out of hand. It was frustrating, seeing them try to rewrite the story, but I knew that the truth was out there. People had started reaching out to me, offering their support, telling me that they'd always seen how differently I was treated. It was validating, but it also made me sad, realizing how long I'd been hoping for something that was never going to happen. I think the moment it all really hit me was when I realized that I'd spent so long waiting for them to change, I hadn't noticed how much I had. I wasn't that kid anymore, the one trying so hard to earn a place at their table. I had my own table now, my own life, and I was happy. It was a strange feeling, that peace that came with acceptance. It was the first time in years that I felt like I could breathe, like I wasn't constantly trying to prove something. They sent a letter, It wasn't an apology, not really. Just a carefully worded message about how they were still my family, how they loved me and hoped I could move past this. Move past it like it was just a phase, like I'd gotten upset and stormed off and would come back when I'd cooled down. I didn't reply. I didn't feel the need to. A week later, they sent another letter. This one was longer, more emotional. They talked about all the things they'd done for me when I was younger, the meals, the rides, the roof over my head, as if that made up for everything. And then, out of nowhere, Ben posted an old photo of us as kids. He captioned it with something about missing his brother and still loving me. It was strange seeing that after everything. People started tagging me, wanting a reaction. But I didn't owe anyone anything. Not anymore. The only people I owed anything to were the ones who'd been there when I had nothing, and none of them were wearing coordinated t-shirts. So I stayed quiet. In that silence, things kept shifting. Laura's husband left. It was as if the facade they'd worked so hard to maintain was crumbling, and they didn't know how to handle it. I watched it all from a distance, feeling detached, like I was watching someone else's story unfold. It was freeing, in a way, knowing that I didn't have to be a part of it anymore. I had my own life, my own path, and I was finally okay with that. It was a long journey, but I'd found my way, and that was all that mattered. I remember the day everything changed. It was like watching a slow-motion train wreck, knowing you can't stop it, but you're drawn to the chaos anyway. I had built this life, this image, of what I thought everyone wanted from me. I was the good daughter, the reliable friend, the supportive wife. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of who I was. I was scared, no, terrified of what would happen if I stopped playing my part. Then, one day, he just left, took the kids, packed up, and moved in with his sister. I didn't even hear it from him or from Laura, his sister. Someone else, a mutual friend, casually dropped it into a conversation, like it was no big deal. I remember feeling this almost surreal detachment, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. And then there was Ben. He lost a speaking gig, something he had set up for himself, because someone sent the event organizers the article that started it all. Along with it, an old podcast clip where he joked about me not following through on anything. That stung, more than I wanted to admit. It was like everyone was moving on with their lives, recalibrating around the fallout. And I was stuck in this limbo. My parents, they tried refinancing their house. It didn't work out. And I knew that it was partly because I had stopped sending the monthly transfers. That was on me. But for once I was living for myself, not to hurt them, not to get back at anyone, but just to finally breathe freely. I started making decisions without that constant nagging worry of whether they'd be impressed. I traveled, went places without being glued to my phone, waiting for some form of acknowledgement. I started creating things, not for approval, but because I genuinely wanted to. It felt like a revelation. Then one night, out of the blue, I received a message from a stranger who had read the article. Just a simple line. "And thank you for showing people like me that it's okay to walk away." That message stayed with me, not because I needed someone to validate my choices, but because it was a reminder that leaving wasn't an act of selfishness. It was self-preservation. It was survival. I wasn't angry that they didn't love me the way I needed. I was angry because they pretended they did, while tearing me down every time I tried to stand tall. That night I opened a box I had shoved into the back of my closet, a box I had almost forgotten about. Inside were copies of the original papers, the ones I had torn to shreds in a fit of frustration. I ran my fingers over them, feeling the thick parchment, cream-colored, still with sharp edges where I had ripped the first set. But it didn't feel like loss anymore. It felt like closure. I don't know where they are now, and I don't check. Sometimes people send me updates, but I delete them before reading to the end. Not because I don't care, but because the version of me who lived for their approval is gone. He's gone and isn't coming back. 2 years have passed since then. It feels like an eternity when I think about it. Recently, I was invited to a wedding. Not a family one, but a friend's. One of the few who saw me at my lowest and stayed. At the reception, someone introduced me to their cousin. She smiled, shook my hand, and asked, "Wait, are you the t-shirt guy?" I laughed, genuinely laughed for the first time in a long while. "Yeah," I said, "yes, I am." She told me she had cut ties with her own parents last year and that my story gave her the courage to do it. I didn't know how to respond. I still don't, but it stuck with me because for so long I believed walking away meant I had failed, that I had surrendered, but in reality, it was the first time I had ever stood up for myself. I sometimes wonder if they still talk about me, if they tell the story differently now. Do they miss me, or just the version of me they could control? I haven't reached out, and they haven't either. Not for a long time. Maybe that says everything. Did I go too far or not far enough? I guess that's for you to decide.